The basic level, asset protection is just like it says, you're protecting your assets from attack. And you invest in real estate, you invest in a syndication. And if it's in your individual name and you get in a car wreck and you don't have enough insurance, I always recommend that people have an umbrella policy of insurance to cover that extreme claim. I mean, that's the biggest risk out there, is this horrific car wreck. It's about piercing the corporate veil, and you set up a corporation or LLC to be protected. You don't want people reaching your personal assets. But when you set up an entity, you have to follow these simple rules called corporate formalities. You have to have meetings, you have to pay the annual fees. If you don't follow these simple rules, the courts will allow someone to go through the corporation and reach your personal assets. And this happens in 50% of all cases. So clearly not enough people are following the corporate formalities. So the book involves real cases. We tell stories to illustrate the principles of how not to do it. And then at the end, we talk about how to do it properly so that your veil keeps you protected.
All right, so tease the book a little bit. Give us some examples of things that people do, which they probably do, and like, oh gosh, I might be in trouble.
Well, a lot of times someone will get a judgment against the corporation, and the person who owns the corporation says, oh man, I got to get the money out of the corporation real quick before they come after the corporation. That's called a fraudulent transfer. And so that's not a good thing. The courts kind of get angry when you have a judgment against the corporation, you drain the corporation of all the money so someone can't collect. So we talk a lot about there in the book about fraudulent transfers. There was also an interesting case, Michael, in San Francisco in 1995. The Communist Party of the United States tried to take over two private companies by piercing their veils. And the judge in San Francisco said, sure, have at these companies. And the appellate court said, wait a minute, we got to look at this. And so it's kind of an interesting case how the courts will not allow the wrong actors to get into a corporation. We also have cases involving husbands and wives. You know, that gets pretty nasty. And some of these family battles, you know, can get really contentious, and just, you know, showing people what they should and shouldn't do to stay protected.
Well, let's talk about some of those specific things. I mean, the real question is, do I need to even listen to the rest of this podcast? Like, you know, is asset protection for me, or is it for a bunch of rich people? Right. So talk about why asset protection might be relevant to a lot of, or almost everybody listening to this.
Well, at a basic level, asset protection is just like it says, you're protecting your assets from attack. And you invest in real estate, you invest in a syndication. And if it's in your individual name and you get in a car wreck and you don't have enough insurance, I always recommend that people have an umbrella policy of insurance to cover that extreme claim. I mean, that's the biggest risk out there, is this horrific car wreck. But if you don't have the right level of insurance, or even if you do have the right level of insurance and it's an extreme claim, they can go after the assets that are in your individual name. So you have a duplex in your individual name. The car wreck victim can go right to court and get control of that duplex. By setting up an LLC, transferring title into the name of the LLC, you have much better protection. Some states like California are weak. The courts in California say, all right, you know, you have a claim against the individual who owns the LLC. We're going to let you go in, barge in, and force a sale of the duplex. Wyoming, on the other hand, Nevada, Delaware have much stronger laws. And we talk about that in my books. You know, start your own corporation. We go into it a lot in this book, loopholes of real estate. But asset protection is something that everybody who invests in real estate needs to know about.
So Garrett, how do you think you should structure in our circumstance? So a lot of people listening are syndicators or apartment owners. How should they set it up? What's the best way to do that?
Well, Garrett, the structure we like is where you know, let's say you're investing in a number of properties and you have a property in Colorado. So Untitled is a Colorado LLC. You have a property in South Carolina. So we have a South Carolina LLC on title to the property. Then those two LLCs are owned by one Wyoming LLC. And that's where the real asset protection, the charging order protection comes in. Is if you get in that car wreck, it's an outside attack. It's not a tenant suing. They would have a claim against the Colorado LLC, but it's an outside attack. They have to fight through Wyoming, and Wyoming offers very good laws.
Why is that? I mean, I've heard that before. Wyoming, Nevada, Delaware. These things keep popping up in various different contexts. But what is it about Wyoming that really helps? And why should there be? I mean, once you get into some scale, either multiple houses or apartment buildings, why does it make sense to roll this up into a Wyoming entity?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The American Revolution, we were fighting the British East India Company, a giant corporation. And at the end of the revolution, the state said, look, we want control of our corporate law. We don't ever want to have to deal with a British East India Company again. So most nations have a federal law. The law of the land is one corporate law. Here in the US, each state has their own corporate law. And that means that states will compete against each other to be the best. And the three that compete against each other the most to be the best are Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming. And they all offer the charging order protection for LLCs. And that means that if someone is suing from the outside, the car wreck victim, they can't barge in like in California and force a sale of the asset. They have to wait for distributions to be made. They're charged with receiving distributions. And you can control it so that distributions aren't made. Plus, attorneys are on a contingency fee. They get a percentage of what they collect. They're not going to spend time going to Wyoming and hiring a Wyoming attorney to monitor a charging order. They're going to go to the next case that has insurance coverage. So we like having the umbrella coverage of personal insurance along with the Wyoming or Nevada or Delaware LLC is the holding LLC for all the other state LLCs. That's how we structure things.
All right, so that makes a lot of sense. So there's different levels of protection. One is, you shouldn't be a jerk and, act like it's so that people start suing you. Number one, that's kind of avoidance. Number two is you have that insurance protection in case there is a lawsuit. And I think the issue really is lawsuits in this country. I mean, I was sued during the house flipping days, and it was awful. They sued for like $500,000. We ended up selling no lie for like $2,500. That's how ridiculous the lawsuit was. But in the meantime, you have to hire an attorney for $10,000 and go through all this rigmarole. And so the danger is, especially when you have multiple entities, multiple houses or apartment buildings, or in my case, I had restaurants. If there was a lawsuit and one of them, and it wasn't structured right, or you're not following some of the formalities to maintain an LLC, they can literally go after your personal assets and your other assets as well, which is crazy to contemplate. And so, when we're all getting started, we don't think about the downside. I mean, I never did, right? And so I just want to make sure that people are thinking through some of these things. And, what are some of the mistakes, Garrett, that you see? Well, either Garrett, really, what you guys see in people making? I mean, I think that the biggest mistake everybody knows about is don't hold stuff in your personal name. Okay, I think we got that. But what about some other mistakes? And maybe some of the stuff in your book is a good one. But when you engage with clients and you do an audit, you're like, oh my goodness, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. We got to fix these 5 things, right? You have exposure here. What are some of those 5 things?
Okay, well, let's go through them. But I want to mention also, Michael, you mentioned the financial drain on litigation. There's also an emotional drain. And you are out there doing business, and then all of a sudden you're sidetracked by this lawsuit, and it can really drain you emotionally as well. So we want to avoid litigation at all costs. And like you were implying, Michael, you're not a jerk to your tenants, right? I mean, you're going to keep the property up, and you need to have insurance. I mean, that's for the benefit of your tenants too. So, that's something. Setting up the LLC for that property is important. What a big mistake people make, Michael, is they forget to transfer title into the name of the LLC. And you've set up the LLC, you think you're protected, but someone goes to the courthouse and sees in the recorder's office that title is still in your individual name. You are not protected. So you need to take that a second step of using a grant deed or a warranty deed to transfer title into your name. You're not going to use a quitclaim deed. That severs your title insurance. So use a grant deed or a quitclaim deed. And then, you need to do the proper filings, tax filings. If it's a one owner LLC, it's a single member LLC. So you don't have to do a federal return. It flows down to the next level. So it's not that difficult from a tax standpoint. The other mistakes, Michael, are people just forget to follow the formalities. I mean, that's why I wrote fail, not fail. There are these simple things you need to do. You need to have a meeting once a year. Now that's required for corporations. Some states don't require it for LLCs, but I don't want you to walk into a courtroom in front of a judge and jury and they say, well, where are your minutes? Where are your meeting minutes? And you go, well, I don't have to have one. Well, a judge, a good attorney actually is going to say, well, how do you run an LLC for 12 years without ever having a meeting? And they're going to score points with the jury. So I want you to have those annual meeting minutes. And if you haven't done them, don't worry. I mean, we have a service. You can contact Corporate Direct. We have a service where we'll clean it up for you to make sure that your minutes are up to date. You want to have a separate bank account for the LLC. A lot of people get into trouble when they set up the LLC, but they don't set up a separate bank account. You have to have a separate LLC bank account, and then you'll pay yourself the profits from the LLC bank account to your personal account. But you don't want to be using your personal account for LLC activities. So those are some of the mistakes people make.